Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Sukaja, and if you're new here, a very warm welcome to you. Happy New Year to every one of you guys watching this video. I hope you had a good start to the year. This is 2026, and I still had left to talk about all the books that I read in December, which is why I decided to make this video. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about the 9 books that I read in the month of December. That's right, I had a reading spree of sorts where on one day I think I read 2 books. So I just went from book to book, and I wanted to really focus on reading in December because my goal for the year was 50 books. At the start of December I had read only 40 books, but by the end I'm happy to report that I was able to read 9 more books. In this video I'm going to talk to you about those 9 books, many of which may end up as my year-end favorites. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first up, I want to talk to you about The Mermaid of Black Conch by Monique Roffey. This book is a vintage earth book actually, and I read another one by this publisher, an imprint. I think it was called The Wall by Marlene Hofferscher, which I read earlier this year. So this is the second vintage that I picked up, and I have to report that I was not disappointed. This book is about a mermaid who ends up being captured by some Yankee American fishermen who are on an expedition in the Caribbean. All right, so the whole setting is really beautiful and what makes this book very interesting. So if you would like a quick trip to the Caribbean, then definitely pick this up, because right from things like the dialect and the whole colonial aspect of the Caribbean islands, where slavery was very rampant and where the white people did inflict a lot of atrocities on the black people. This book is pretty relevant and explores those themes as well. But at the heart of it, it's actually a magic realism tale about a mermaid who is a sea creature from mythical times who exists in the waters, and how she develops a relationship with a fisherman who first sights her when he's out fishing. He's playing the guitar and singing on his boat, and she can hear him. They fall in love, and this is basically a love story as well. It can seem a little sad at times because the mermaid goes through a lot, and she also transforms later on. I don't want to share too many details, but this was pretty unputdownable, and it is the kind of read that's a real page turner. The story is very adventurous. I think it's a medium-paced book overall, and plays very well with the whole idea of mermaids and how we treat people who look differently to us, and a lot of things about human nature are also explored in this book. So I highly recommend it. If any of these themes sound interesting to you, then definitely worth picking this up. Next, I read Possession by Annie Ernaux. This is my second book by Annie Ernaux, and this is kind of like a memoir. It's only 60 pages long, so it's less than 100, and you can definitely read it within like half an hour if you decide to. But there were things in this book that were written really well that I actually ended up highlighting a few bits. And this is essentially at its heart about a woman who is pining over somebody who is no longer in her life the way he once was. So she's totally in love with this man and smitten, but then she knows she can't have him, and he has chosen somebody else. There's another woman in his life that he's chosen. So she kind of has to come to terms with this aspect of rejection. So through writing, she's kind of healing herself, and she's kind of going through this heartbreak, but at the same time, she's creating distance from the episode by writing about it. So writing as a form of healing, as a form of therapy, all of that is explored in this. And she comes to a lot of revelations. She's pretty brutal and honest. Like, some of the things she says here can be universally applicable to women who face rejection from male counterparts in life. I thought it was really like raw and brutal and honest, and she doesn't shy away from calling out her feelings exactly as they are. So this is Possession by Annie Ernaux, and it's translated from the French by Anna Moshkovakis. Yeah. Next, I read Someone to Watch Over You by Kumi Kimura, and this is translated by Yuki Tejima from the Japanese. So this is another short book, and I think it's around 200 pages plus, but you can definitely read this in a day because it is, again, simply unputdownable. There is a pandemic that's going on. It's set in Tokyo, and there's a woman who's living by herself. There's a man whom she meets because he comes to her house to help fix her washing machine, which is not cooperating. So he comes as a handyman, but she is so lonely and she doesn't have anybody in her life that she kind of wants to form a bond. And this is in the midst of the pandemic, right? So you can't get out of your house just like that. You have to take precautions. Half the time the woman is paranoid and she's like excessively cleaning the things that come into a house, making sure people who come in are following rules like sanitizing to the absolute extent, right, that they can. And what I liked about this is it's translated really well. I think Yuki Tejima really knows how to do justice to the original text in translation. So you will not be disappointed with this. At times it also felt like a thriller and a bit of a mystery because there is mention of murder and things like that in this, but you don't really know what is happening and it kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. But it's also really good at painting this picture of loneliness and how two individuals in Japan must kind of overcome this and the kind of relationship they have. It's basically a mutually beneficial partnership, so to speak. And it reminded me of The Housekeeper and the Professor, but of course that is a more endearing love story, and this is not really a love story. This is a very different exploration. Something you wouldn't have expected is what you're going to get when you read this book. Speaking of murders, I also read The Mushroom Tapes by Helen, Garner, Chloe Hooper, and Sarah Krasnostein. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but this is basically a book that reads like a podcast, and I'm sure it would be a very interesting audiobook if there is one that exists. But this is Conversations on a Triple Murder Trial. This is actually a non-fiction book that I picked, and this is based on true crime. So a true crime that was committed in Australia a few years ago, which became such a big thing that it was talked about internationally and it made the news, right? So this is about a woman who is a murderer, and she is responsible for kind of allegedly committing 3 murders at the same time, right? So she is a woman who invites her father-in-law, mother-in-law, and her other relatives. She attempts to poison them using mushrooms, all right, which are available in the wild and kind of freely, open source. So this actually took place, and there are news articles and things you can find on the internet about this murder, which makes this book even more interesting. But this is actually about the trial that took place afterwards, after she was kind of convicted, and before she was like sent to jail, like really to hear out her side of the story. But what is done really well in this is that the authors play with ambiguity and they kind of have real conversations, because there's 3 of them and they want to talk about this trial and they're kind of figuring it out, how are they going to kind of best convey the whole essence of the trial in the beginning of the story. But then they end up just recording their conversations, and that's why it's called Mushroom Tapes, because the authors are recording it, right? So it's really interesting and it keeps you wondering, keeps you guessing as to what are the motivations of this woman. Why would she want to kill her in-laws, right? And she even attempts to have killed her husband at one point, but then he survives, but the others die. And it's all because of the mushroom poisoning. And she also gives herself a little bit. So she really puts a lot of thought into this whole execution of the murder. I thought it was brilliant in that the way this book was kind of written. It really was a good page turner, kept me hooked from start to finish, very interesting. There's no truth really that gets uncovered in this. You know the premise and you are constantly making guesses along with the authors, and you're just like, yes, maybe it could have been this as well. I didn't think about that. I didn't see this side of the story. So the different authors provide their perspectives and they're kind of discussing it themselves. So you're basically in on the discussions and you feel like you're watching the trial, because there's a moment where the jury has to go and discuss the verdict and you're very much in that space with the criminal. It creates the feels, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So that is The Mushroom Tapes by Helen, Garner, and 2 other authors. And next I read All Fours by Miranda July. This has been a much talked about book ever since it was shortlisted for the Women's Prize of Fiction in 2025. And I have been intrigued to read this book since I've seen it on Instagram and people talking about it. So basically this is about a woman who is middle-aged. She's 45 years old and she is married. She has a child as well, but she's kind of going through like some kind of midlife crisis, and she wants to kind of live out whatever she's feeling and kind of come to terms with what she's feeling. There's a lot that she's feeling under the surface. and she feels the best way she can do this is by taking a cross-country trip from her hometown to New York City. And she's never done something like this before, but this is something she has to do alone, and her husband's on board and everything, and so is her child. And there's also LGBTQIA plus representation in this, so it's got that as well. And the woman decides to kind of go on this trip, but then she secretly doesn't actually do what she says she's going to do. Instead, she goes to a motel, and it's literally half an hour away from where she lives, and she kind of just stays there. She loves her own company, getting that time back to be by herself, pretending that she's on a 2-week getaway. So the woman is pretty unhinged, and she is just exploring where exactly her life is going to go next. But she's not really doing the work either. She's just like kind of drifting. And this is, in some senses, it's also been described as a menopause novel. And in that, I think it's important because we do read a lot of books about women in their prime, but we often do not get a character that keeps you like interested from start to finish, who's actually plus 40, right? She's like at 45. And what are the things a 45-year-old woman is interested in? What does she like to do? What are her experiences like? So all of that kind of gets captured pretty well in this book. It really makes you have that experience holistically of what a woman is, right? Like how much are women driven by their hormones, for instance. And all of that comes into play in this book. So from that standpoint, it's really good. And that was All Force by Miranda July. The next book I have here is a book that's perfect for gifting in any season. This is actually part of a series, and this is the second book in the series that's come out very recently. The people at HarperCollins India gifted this to me, and I'm grateful. This is Notes from the Ginza Shihodo Stationery Shop. It's translated from Japanese by Emily Balistreri, and it's written by Kenji Ueda. So this is a book that is very short and sweet. It contains 5 stories, and each of the stories are named after stationery items. The first story, for instance, is named after flashcards, and the second one is scissors and things like that. So each of the stories has the ability to pull you in right away. It's written really well. The translation is good as well. And I felt that there was a feel-good factor that kind of floated throughout the stories of this book. It's very lighthearted in tone, and if you like cozy fiction that has a feel-good after effect as well, then definitely pick this up. So this is about the Ginza Stationery Shop, which is the central setting for this novel, more or less. And it's about the people who come to that store, the customers as well as the owner of the store, who is a very lovable character and somebody who really goes out of the way to kind of help customers. It's about the daily encounters that this person has, and also maybe with children, maybe with different demographics of the population, different age groups. There's always some takeaway in every story, is what I felt. And also it's very authentically Japanese in that the Japanese people, they really do want to kind of pay attention to detail and really fix problems by addressing the root cause, by making life easier. Like if they can come up with a device that can save you 1 millisecond of like extra effort, they will do that. And a lot of the stationery items here are also very well thought out, and the stories are very memorable. So I absolutely love this, and I rated this 5 out of 5 stars. So if this sounds interesting, you should definitely consider reading it. Next, I have Yasunari Kawabata Snow Country. This is a Penguin modern classic, and apparently this author has won the Nobel Prize for Literature at one point. This book is actually a quick read, but the pace of this book is slow, and it kind of has a melancholy feel throughout the length of the story. And in this book, we meet a man who is kind of cheating on his wife, but that's not the main focus of the book. Instead, it's kind of about the beauty of the Japanese countryside during the winter season. I think that's the real focus. And also, he kind of escapes the bustling city life of Tokyo by visiting geisha who are living in the mountains. And he develops relationships with 2 of the geisha. It's just a very transportative read in that there were moments when I felt I was sitting in a train with this man, and he was kind of an onlooker looking on at a geisha who was accompanying another older man in the train to this kind of resort where he's going to have a bit of a sojourn. The descriptions of the light coming into the train, all of that was very mesmerizing. So the book has that quality, and enticing in that sense, but at the same time the women in this aren't portrayed really well. And I'm not going to talk too much about this because I did talk about it in another video which I'm going to link up here, which is of my recommendations for short reads that you can get through quickly. So I've already touched up about this book, so I'm gonna just end my review of this right over here. Next, I decided to pick up a chunkster in December. This is The Map of Love by Adhaf Soueif, and this is a book that was shortlisted for the Booker Prize way back in 1999. This is actually set in Egypt and it takes place in Alexandria and Cairo, and that's the main draw. That's the reason why I picked this up, because I wanted to kind of read something that was set in a very exotic locale, and at the same time it's historical fiction in that the main character in this, her name is Lady Anna Winterbourne, and she is living in Victorian England at the start of this book, and she decides to embark on this voyage to Egypt and kind of live there, and then marries a guy who is from Egypt. His name is Sharif Pasha, and he's really involved in the whole political context of the time. But I was a little lost when I read that bit, because there were bits about this which totally went over my head, because I'm not somebody who is well versed with Egyptian history, particularly during the Victorian times, and those bits I felt were a bit of a drag. But I absolutely loved the setting, and I loved like the descriptions of the markets, and I've actually been to Egypt, so this really took me back to like my vacation there when I was a child. So this was really interesting, but at the same time I felt it could have been a little shorter, and it's written in an epistolary fashion in that there are a lot of letters, and it's kind of history being pieced together at a much later date. So basically Anna Winterbourne marries an Egyptian, becomes almost Egyptian, gives up her Englishness, so to speak, although she's not forced into doing that. So there's also a lot of light that's shed on the customs that prevailed back in the day in Egypt and how foreigners were perceived, because Egypt was initially colonized by English, right? There's a lot about how perceptions worked back in the day and how people would ostracize somebody who decided to go and be with an Egyptian. Especially the British would definitely do that, and the Egyptians were pretty kind as they are portrayed in this book. I think it's interesting if you know the history of Egypt, but there were bits that I felt were just a drag, because I did not really bother to kind of go and read up about the history of the time in Egypt in the 1900s. What was interesting is the whole piecing together of a family's history, because many years later, they find the letters that Anna Winterbourne wrote to her friends in England about her life in Egypt. It's like her great-grandchildren are kind of looking at those letters and piecing together the life of their great-grandmom. And there's also some interconnectedness in the family. Like, so Sharif has his own great-grandchildren. Great-grandchildren of both families are trying to piece together what actually took place 100 years ago, and it kind of shifts in time a lot, and the format is also shifting in that some of it is letters, some of it is narrative. There were bits about diaries as well. There was diary entries from Anna's journals as well as letters that she'd written but to other people. I enjoyed reading the diary bits, but there were times when I couldn't figure out whether it was a diary entry or a letter, and that wasn't very clear. And the time frame also wasn't very clear. Like certain books, they at least tell you this is Anna's journal, right? And then the date, and it's much more clear cut. But this book, it didn't have that kind of clear cutness. So I was a bit lost as a reader, and that was my only criticism. But otherwise, I'm sure makes for a very interesting read if you're aware of the context and the history of Egypt and the political struggles, strife, the Arab Spring, all of that. There's bits about Palestine as well in this. It's all encompassing in that sense. That's The Map of Love by Adhaf Soueif. Okay, I've tried making this part of the video 3 times now, and I hope 4th time I get lucky. Lastly, I read Iris Murdoch's The Bell, and this is not a book that I've heard a lot of people talk about, and I know it's an unconventional place to start when it comes to Iris Murdoch. I think a lot of people start with The Sea, which is her most famous novel, and I do have that on my shelves, but I decided to pick this up instead. I picked this copy of this book on my trip to Spain earlier this year, and I was intrigued and I wanted to read it. So this has elements of Gothic literature in it, but it's not end-to-end thoroughly Gothic. It is about a woman who is a bit of a rebel. She's a little clumsy, she's a klutz. She's where the book begins, and the whole story unfolds from how we meet this woman. She's married, but she has an unconventional relationship with her husband. She just had an affair and she's kind of moving from London to this other place, which is back with her husband, where he is staying with a bunch of other people. And this is in the countryside, and they have their own little villa, and these people are living in a sort of commune where the commune is kind of trying to be utopian in that they are growing their own vegetables, harvesting throughout the year. Each of them has different tasks to kind of ensure the upkeep of the farm and things like that. And all of them produce food and eat together, and they're kind of like a family, but none of them are related to each other. So that's the main crux of the novel. And there is this symbol of the bell. So where the people live, there used to be a mythological bell that was really big, and it was very important to the village. But then the bell kind of fell down and got submerged in the bog, so to speak. And they are trying to install a new bell now in this particular story. And that's a monumental thing that happens towards the end. Everything that takes place in this novel kind of culminates in a climax when the bell is being reinstalled. And that's pretty exciting, that particular scene. So it is a very interesting novel, but it also requires you to put in a lot of work and understand what's really being said that's not being said directly by the author. As in, it's not going to be very straightforward. You're going to have to think about it after reading. You know, it's that kind of book. But the characters are real characters and they will stay with you. The imagery is also really beautiful. Some of it will stay with you long after you've read the book. So I thought this was a good introduction to Iris Murdoch. And yes, I would still want to read her other books, and I will report back when I've read them. So those were the 9 books that I read in December. What did you read in December? I'd be interested to hear in the comments down below if you managed to hit your reading goals for 2025. What was your favorite book and things like that. I will be back with another video where I share my absolute top 10 favorites. After having read everything that I read in 2025, I will be back with that list in another video. Meantime, I hope you're having a good start to the year. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. That'll be really helpful. That's it from me. Stay safe, stay sane, happy reading. Bye.